Good morning, everyone, and welcome to join Auntie's open webinar about balancing work and life. My name is Mikael. I'm one of the customer happiness managers here at Auntie, taking care of our practicalities of our customers. Those of you who don't know what Auntie is, we offer psychological support to solve those everyday issues before they become too big, and we do that by offering one-to-one confidential discussion packages that we call Auntie packages. Our lovely expert today is Hanna-Kaisa Ranninen, who is also our Auntie's own expert. She's one of the persons who's actually taking care of the end user discussions with you. Before we dive into the actual topic, I want to remind you that all of your microphones are automatically muted. So if you want to share some thoughts, ideas about the topics today, please do so via the public chat. And if you want to leave us questions that we will tackle at the end of the presentation, please use the private chat functionality. So without further ado and being mindful of the time, I will give stage to Hanna-Kaisa, and we will all get to listen to this topic of balancing work and life, a relevant topic for all of us. So take it away, Hanna-Kaisa.
Thank you, Mikael, and welcome on my behalf this morning as well. So balancing work and life, a pretty complex topic that we will try to tackle today in 20-25 minutes or so, and then leave some time for your questions as well. I'll shortly introduce myself. So my name is Hanna-Kaisa Ranninen, and I'm a mental performance coach. My background is in business and in sport and exercise psychology, so I try to use sport and exercise psychology methods with working people and experts and professionals. With Auntie, I mostly work with our leaders, managers, teamwork, related packages, and stress management and recovery also in particular. And our agenda for today. First, we'll look at kind of your own state. So how can you be more productive during your workday? So we'll tackle time management a little bit and topics like that. And then how to be really off when you are off work. So how to set those boundaries between work time and free time and really recover. So these are kind of the three sections for today. And then, as already stated, at the end, we'll have time for your questions and comments. But not only your maybe questions, but also your experiences. So feel free to share if you have any great tips or tricks or experiences that you want to share in the chat. So we'll read those out loud as well. But let's get on to it. So I want to start with this quote by Stephen Covey. The key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. So what this basically means is kind of looking at your schedule and your life with a value-based lens. So what your personal values are, your core values, what's really important to you in life, and scheduling those into your calendar. So it can be something that is kind of both your work and your free time, your social relationships, all of those important things. Here today, of course, we'll focus first on your work priorities. But while you're on, be on. So how to kind of enhance your productivity, being more effective at work. So when you have a handle on that, so then it's much more easier for you to detach from work and then move on to your free time and do those meaningful things, valuable things that you want to do outside of work. So we'll go on to the topic of time management first a little bit. So I'm sure most of you, of course, have different sorts of methods and strategies for time management. You have tried probably many things, but of course here, kind of looking at the overall topic through the value lens. So scheduling those things that are important in your life and how they are reflected in your time. So this is actually a task that we Auntie professionals many times give our clients as well, to kind of track their time, how time is used every day. And if that reflects your personal values, if there is something that is kind of amiss, if there is something that feels that is somehow in opposition to your values, and if there would be some small steps that you could take to kind of correct that a little bit. And then kind of planning time ahead of time. What will I spend my time on? Kind of considering what you have actually done. So my schedule and then what I ended up doing. So comparing those two. And also planning maybe those recovery functions ahead of time, not only work related things, but also things that you like to do outside of work. So making time in your schedule for those as well. We people really usually enjoy visual cues when we see something and we see it constantly. Most of the time, for many people, it's the schedule, the calendar, where we see stuff every day or our to-do lists. So kind of making those to-do lists and schedules reflect what we actually want in life. And maybe now you're already starting to think kind of, well, how about my own schedule? Do I do this in a way that kind of reflects my own values? But kind of looking at it with a reflective mindset. So, what is already working? What do I already know how to do in my time management? And what hasn't been really working lately and why? What are kind of the obstacles that I notice? And is there something that I could do at the moment to relieve some of those obstacles? Is there some help or guidance that I would need in order to make my time management a little bit better and to reflect your personal values? I just wanted to throw this in there. For many of you, probably the Eisenhower matrix is already familiar time management tool. And many of my clients also tell me that they've seen it before but haven't really used it. So I think this is a wonderful tool to kind of get it going with time management, just to kind of categorize a little bit where your work tasks go. So most of the time, at least with my clients, we notice that people are mostly in the crisis quadrant. So everything is urgent and important. And it, of course, has to do with your job role and what type of work you do, whether this applies fully to your job. And then kind of the statement is that 40% of the time you would preferably be in the quality quadrant. So planning and preparing, doing things that are kind of preventative, developing relationships or kind of self-developing, doing this quadrant maybe goes into that space as well. And then on the lower end of the spectrum, you have kind of the confusion scrap quadrant. So things that are not so important, interceptions, things that you do to procrastinate, for instance, or then kind of being distracted all the time internally or from outside sources. So you can take a screenshot of this maybe, or then just Google Eisenhower matrix and you can get started with time management. So this is a kind of wonderful first step to do, and maybe do periodically within your team as well. So you can look at it on an individual basis or then on a team basis, what we are doing at the moment. And just some tips for better productivity. So kind of bringing clarity and realism onto your to-do list and onto your goals and into your schedule, of course, as well. So looking into if you have set any goals for your work week or work day, so that would be maybe the first thing to do. Not just to have a massive to-do list or many to-do lists that you constantly look at and see that you're not getting everything done, but maybe setting goals for the work week. So 3 to 5 bigger goals that you want to achieve that work week, and then kind of deriving from that a few smaller goals for each day. How are you going to, so to speak, starting to eat the frog or the elephant? So piecing it out to smaller realistic goals. And also then budgeting time for ad hoc things, interruptions, those things that your schedule wouldn't be so tight that you wouldn't have any room for those things that inevitably will occur during your work day and work week as well. And then if they don't occur, you have time for self-development or maybe a longer recovery periods. Then minimizing internal and external distractions. So internal distractions are the ones that we produce ourselves. So it can be that we have kind of reserved focus time to do some development work or preparatory planning, for instance. And then kind of our mind reminds us of something that, hey, this is something that I need to remember, or hey, this is some email that I forgot to send. And then we go immediately and send that email. So maybe a better kind of structure for you would be, or strategy would be, to just kind of note it down and then continue on the task at hand rather than then switching, because switching from task to task is kind of very cognitively hard for us. So we then need to go to the other task and come back. So it's very taxing. So rather have a system in place where when you are focusing, you will stay on that task and kind of minimize those internal distractions. Of course, then external distractions are the things that we all know, somebody coming to ask something, or maybe a notification will pop up on the screen. So maybe finding strategies to make other people know that you are actually now not to be distracted. So making sure notifications are not the ones that are ruling your work life, but rather you would then go and see messages when it suits you. Of course, here as well, there are jobs and professions where you need to be available all the time, but kind of critically looking into that belief if this is really true in your work role. And then finding maybe other ways. Sometimes with my clients, they kind of have created these messages for their team. Maybe in Teams status, you can write that now I'm focusing and I can be reached from this phone number, for instance, so that you're not totally unreachable for your colleagues, but there's kind of a boundary that you set, that not by messages, but by phone. So it can maybe raise the bar a little bit, that people will then maybe gather a few questions before they call you. Procrastination is a curious topic, and many people kind of see that as a sign of laziness. And kind of we at Auntie tend to disagree, of course, with this. It can be a sign of many things, but usually what it most certainly is a sign of is that the task that you're going to tackle is somehow too challenging or too big. And we tend to just kind of move it along and do it another day or another week. And then it comes to the point where it's a massive task, and we get more and more stressed. And procrastination kind of usually eats up our recovery as well, because we haven't started the task that we were supposed to start, so we are not recovering either when we are not doing it. So it's kind of this in-between state that is very taxing as well. So it could be an indicator of, okay, this task is quite big. So how could I maybe divide it into smaller tasks? And I like to use it as an indicator as well, that maybe there is some sparring or help or mentoring that I could use from somebody else in this matter. So looking at it together can make the tasks a little bit smaller looking already. And then kind of making sure that the tools that you use are suitable for you personally, your job role, your preferences, that they wouldn't hold you back or kind of send you notifications that distract you, or that they would work for you. So just periodically reviewing what type of tools you use. This is something that we do with my clients as well sometimes, that we kind of review them together, and then people sometimes notice that this isn't actually working for me at this stage of my career or in this new role that I am now in. So I should maybe experiment or be more flexible with it, try something new. But then from productivity, so being on when you're on. So I kind of, from my background, of course, want to use the athlete kind of comparison here. So when athletes train, they train, but when they're off, they are really off. They want to recover. So kind of using this analogy for work life, I think works really well. So when we're off, be off. So find rest and recovery. So you get to evaluate a little bit how your battery is drained at the moment. So of course, all of us have stressors in our life. Kind of getting rid of all stress is not the goal. That would make our life pretty kind of meaningless. And striving for things that are important for us is, of course, something that makes our life valuable. But we can have physical drains, sort of lack of sleep or irregular lifestyle, or mental drains, which of course then includes work, social relationships, and those type of things, or lack of maybe autonomous time. Emotional drains as well, so feelings of inadequacy at work, or resentment or bitterness, and those type of things. And those kind of drain our battery, our recovery capacity. But all of these things are a part of life as well. So kind of tackling those and living with those also builds our resilience. But kind of having regular check-ins with yourself, reflection time with yourself, can help to stabilize your energy. So checking in with your mind and body, how you are feeling, what would you need right now? This is something that I recommend also scheduling, maybe once a day or at least a few times a week. Of course, we would need this every day, but kind of just to get you started. Just to have a break. That what would I need right now? Would I need to maybe have a glass of water? Would I need to go outside? Would I actually feel like stretching out a little bit or talking to somebody, or whatever it would be to kind of make you feel relaxed and recovered? But it's important to kind of act. But before we can act, we need to notice how we are feeling. And self-knowledge is, of course, here the key. If I'm feeling somehow jittery, or if I'm feeling nervous, and I'm feeling anxious somehow, or what am I really feeling? And then doing something to make yourself feel better, and kind of gathering up the toolbox for yourself, so you have different tools that you know that usually will help you. And of course, kind of being mindful about treating yourself with kindness, and being compassionate towards yourself. So speaking to yourself as you would for a trusted colleague or a best friend. So trying to be mindful of your internal dialogue with this when you're feeling something, not to blame yourself of feeling some way or other, but accepting all feelings as they are. Well, rest. So first, as I said, kind of becoming aware of how your usual tools actually work and make you feel. Somehow we kind of end up doing things sometimes that are kind of nice feeling when we are doing them, but in the long run, not very kind of recovery inducing. So, for instance, we might be scrolling social media in bed, kind of the last thing in the evening, just to get some autonomous time. And kind of the strive for that time is a very positive thing, that I want something that is just for myself. In the short term, it might feel okay, but then in the long term, it might interrupt with quality of sleep and those type of things. Or then kind of having a glass of two of wine in the evening just to relax, get the kind of nervous system somehow to recover, and then noticing that it also affects our quality of sleep in the long run. So looking at the short-term and long-term benefits. And then for children, routines are very important, and for us adults as well. So kind of having a pretty straightforward routine with when we get up and when we go to bed really can improve our resilience, our well-being, our recovery skills. And the same goes, of course, to breaks, having our lunch break every day away from the computer, kind of trying to focus on other stuff in the middle of the day. So having that routine built in is also important. And then, as I said before already, kind of planning those recovery periods ahead of time. And this is something that I feel is very important to also discuss within the work community, within the organization, or within the team that you are working in, so that it wouldn't become only an individual responsibility. So we can think about this in many contexts within the context of one day. So kind of planning to go on a walk in the woods, for instance, after work. So putting that in your schedule so you have that visual cue that you're going to look at all day, and then it kind of makes you more committed to actually do the action. Or then you can look at it within a few weeks of work. If it has been very hard, you have been sprinting in the kind of at the maximum performance level. So already planning for recovery period afterwards. So how am I going to recover from this hard period of working? Or how do we as a team make sure that after this kind of maximum effort, we then have some routine tasks ahead of us that don't take as much kind of our energy. So it would become like this wave-like movement of ups and downs. So high performance and then high recovery. And then remembering that recovery is, there are kind of certain elements that are, of course, very human and everybody enjoys them, but then how you get those benefits can be very individual. So how you kind of want to recover, how you want to spend your time outside of work. If for you it's exercise, what type of exercise, if it's yoga for somebody and then CrossFit for somebody else, or if it's knitting or learning a language or playing an instrument or whatever it is. So there is individuality there. So kind of experimenting with different options. And for you as well, maybe today you need something different that you needed 5 years ago. So also kind of keeping in touch with yourself that way, that what would you need now, what would be interesting to try out. Now, as we've gone through kind of your on state and your off state, so kind of then looking at the boundary between those two. Just a short questionnaire for you to think about kind of how do you struggle with setting boundaries if you do. Most of us have maybe some um, trouble in some areas and then not so much in others. Do you find it difficult to say no, or to say no to what type of things? Here, of course, we're talking about work, so maybe kind of declining some new work opportunities if your plate is already very full. And this is, of course, very hard many times because we don't want to disappoint other people, or we don't want to get other people in trouble if their plates are also full. And then kind of course, many of these tie together. So do you tend to kind of think that other people's needs are more important than your needs? So do you kind of treat other people better than you treat yourself? And in what respects? And then is it hard for you to stick to your habits, kind of keep going at them when there is nobody else involved or nobody around? So you're just doing it for yourself, so only for you. It's sometimes easier to think about your team, for instance, if you're in a managerial position, that you're doing things for your team, but then kind of forgetting your own boundaries, your own needs, that you also have things that you are entitled to. Or then does it feel like some people in your environment kind of regularly overstep your boundaries? Um, this is something that happens in life, and we need to kind of start noticing that, and then kind of be more assertive in our own boundary setting. And then being okay with the fact that boundary setting doesn't feel nice. So it doesn't give us those euphoric, positive feelings, not at first. So we have to be okay with letting other people down as well. Then it's kind of the other people's responsibility to deal with their feelings. Not that we would be kind of rude or somehow not nice, but we can be assertive, and we sometimes disappoint other people as well. Maybe some signs of boundary overstepping your boundaries, if you start to feel kind of resentment towards other people somehow, or feeling kind of like a martyr type feelings. So those are already signals that some boundary issues are there. So some tips for better boundaries. So being aware of your do's and don'ts. So your values, basically, what is important to you right now in life? What do you want out of working life? How do you want to spend your free time? What type of boundary is suitable for you at this stage? It can be very different in different stages of our lives, kind of regarding what is going on in our lives in general. Then communicating the boundaries as well. Kind of, it's not enough that we know the boundaries and then we get disappointed time and time again because we haven't really communicated what we need to other people. So kind of a very simple example of these boundaries is just the example that I gave earlier. So that in Teams you have a status that now I'm focusing and you can reach me from here and here. So that's a boundary. If you're used to kind of maybe those notifications and always reacting whenever they come and then feeling resentful that I cannot have this focused time. So that's a boundary. And then having routines in place. And this is something that we kind of come full circle from time management as well. So if you don't have goals for your working day, if you don't have routines, you don't have kind of appropriate daily goals and weekly goals, then it's really hard to say no and decline and put those boundaries and kind of know also where you want to say yes, if you have resources to say yes. So it's kind of all this jumble of things. But when you have kind of goals and your role at work is kind of clear, so then it's much easier to decline some things because you know where your priorities are. So it kind of first clearing up your own role, your responsibilities, your weekly and daily goals, and then it's easier to go to boundary setting. And this is kind of just to sum it up. Just some key takeaways. We're getting to the end of the webinar, so just a few things summarized. So improving your efficiency while you work, so then you have more time to rest, or not maybe more time, but you are more restful when you have these things in place at work. So the boundary becomes more clear between work and free time. Then increasing your self-knowledge, so kind of finding out which are the strategies that make you recovered, which are the things that are blocking your recovery, and if there's anything you can do about those at the moment. And then working on setting those boundaries that we just went through, and then being compassionate towards yourself. So trying out different things, experimenting, being kind of mentally flexible in those type of things, and kind of enjoying progress, not being perfect. But thank you, being mindful of the time, and I want to get to your questions as well. I'll end with this quote. But thank you on my behalf.
Thank you, Hanna-Kaisa. We actually have a really nice comment slash question
Wonderful.
in our chat. So sometimes when someone is asking questions about doing a task that I know how to do, I will often put aside my task to assist or teach them how to do it, or either do the task because it's quick or easy to do and will get them working and being productive again, and ultimately will benefit the team.
Yeah.
However, A former team leader, one of this person once said that don't be so eager to help other people achieve their tasks at the expense of your own. If I feel it benefits the team, I feel conflicted. So
Yeah.
any advice or tips or dealing with these kinds of interruptions?
I love this question. So very well formed and also I think very typical with what we usually discuss with people in Auntie packages as well. So here I think you have kind of conflicting goals, and one method that you could use is just a timeout method. So rather than instantly going and helping the other person with their task, you could try a timeout. So kind of figuring out a suitable time for you, maybe 15 minutes, half an hour, and you could suggest that maybe I'll do this task first that I'm kind of now doing. And would it be okay for you to do this in half an hour's time or tomorrow? So kind of offering some time slots that would be useful. So rather than kind of distracting yourself immediately, having time to maybe get your own task into a position where it's easier to get back to it and then helping the other person. So I think that's something. And then sometimes it happens that you give this time out, the other person starts to reflect and think, and they actually get much further within that time already in their own thinking. So when you get back to them, maybe they have developed some solutions already, or maybe they have gathered some more questions. So the time that you then use together can be used kind of more effectively, if that makes sense.
Yes. Then another question about this is that if you're in the position where you feel like you have to learn new technologies, learn new skills, but in order to remember them and be proficient in them, you need to, of course, practice them regularly. So, and this kind of often ends up seeping also on their free time
Mm.
and can feel like work. So we kind of come back to the setting boundaries thing. So, any ideas on a situation like this one?
Yeah, well, I think that's also a wonderful question. So thank you for that. And it's not that we would be able to draw boundaries within our thoughts perfectly. So we cannot tell our mind to no feelings and thoughts after 5 p.m. So I only want to think about not work related stuff. But what could work for you is, of course, kind of setting those times within your schedule and calendar when you are going to look at this stuff. And then I don't know if it would work that maybe not doing it at the end of the day, maybe choosing those times. But what I really like with my clients with these types of things is kind of having maybe a work wrap up diary or a journaling type of exercise where you reflect at the end of the day what you have been working on within that day and where you want to continue tomorrow. What were your successes today in learning those things? What were maybe open questions that you need to have answers to? Kind of having those thoughts from your head onto paper would help a lot, and then kind of help with that boundary setting when you then progress to your free time. So committing to 10 minutes of journaling about your workday at the end of the day would be a really good tip, at least in my opinion.
Yes. And lastly, we have a really good comment also in the chat. So when planning my day, I only use 80% of my time and keep about 20% as a buffer for unforeseeable things or for my personal relaxation. A really cool and practical tip that
Yeah,
everyone can actually take into use.
I like that. 80/20, always a good rule in many,
Yes.
many contexts.
But hey, with that, we actually come to the end. So thank you for all the questions and comments in the chats. Hope we gave you some food for thought. And like I stated in the chat, a recording of this one will be forwarded to everyone who attended and registered for the webinar. So you can get back to the slides and of course, the topic that we presented. But for now, thank you for joining us and have a great day. And thank you, Hanna-Kaisa, once again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.